Welcome to podcast number 53.
50, get out of here. Welcome to GothCast. I'm Dr. Sanders.
I'm just Bryan.
That's right.
That's who I am. That's who you are.
That's it.
Moving right along.
All right. Okay, welcome to GothCast episode 53. And today, we're going to be talking about mummies, not our mothers. I know that many people listen overseas and call their mummy their mothers. But we're actually talking about mummy movies today. Just like how we did a Dracula episode a while ago.
I guess I should contribute something to this.
I think you should.
Yeah. I mean, that is why I'm here, is so you're just not talking to
nowhere. Yeah.
To the air.
Yeah.
Mummies that have bandages and are raised from the dead and typically have some sort of curse associated with them,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, you can catch GothCast on Spotify, on iTunes. It is brought to you in part by the Belfry Network, bringing you lots of great different podcasts and lots of different content relating to the Goth subculture. And of course, if you're interested in anything GothCast, you can go to gothcast.com to see everything. And just in case you haven't been noticing, GothCast comes out every 2 weeks on Wednesday. So I just thought I would point that. I mean, if you look back at the schedule, you can already see that, but I just thought I would say it within the podcast itself.
In case you're new to podcasts in general.
And this one.
And this one specifically.
Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks now.
So that's everything I wanted to get out of the way, all the stuff I got to plug. And today, getting into some mummies. So we're going to take a look at The Mummy from 1932. Then we're going to take a look at The Mummy from 1999. And then we're going to take a look at...
What's the third one? I can't wait.
The Mummy.
Oh, yeah.
From 2017.
Yeah, that's a great movie name.
Yeah. That's.
Obviously.
I mean, I just The Mummy, The Mummy, The Mummy.
All spelled the same.
All spelled the same.
Emphasis ours.
Yes. This is obviously kind of continuing the previous GothCast episode where I covered the Dracula movies. So I did Dracula, I think 1931, 58, which is the horror of Dracula with Christopher Lee. And then I think it's 1992 is when Bram Stoker's Dracula with Winona Ryder, Keanu Reeves, Gary Oldman. So I thought it was a really interesting look at those. It's like the same story, essentially, especially because it's trying to be based off a book every single time. But then they try to adjust it and do it their own different way throughout the decades. And it's really crazy how there's a lot of similarities between things, but then some things are just so radically different. And with The Mummy, we have a strange one because Dracula is based on a book. Or it is a book. The Dracula book is based on real. Yeah. You know what I mean? But the movie, like the films of Dracula, are based on a book. And so is Frankenstein. Frankenstein's based on a book.
Right.
And... like, all these movies aren't really based on a book. Like, there's no real, like, just mummy story. I mean, there's lots of...
stories about mummies.
Yeah, there's lots of stories about mummies and lots of things that have been written about mummies and lots of thrillers and different things, but there's no just definitive book on that is a work of fiction relating to this subject. And...
yeah, there isn't something you can point out and say, this was the reference material they used in order to create this screenplay.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we have. It's actually an oddball for the Universal movies because, you know, you have Dracula, Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, you know, all these different ones that are based off of books. And this is it. They just had to kind of make it up. And, yeah. Anyway, we're going to see some changes, but we're going to get straight into The Mummy from 1932. I
have something to admit. I have something that I've got to admit. Otherwise, it's just going to weigh on me until I come out with this information. When I was younger, I didn't know that Universal Monsters meant monsters by the Universal Motion Picture Film. I just thought there were monsters that were like known around the world. Because they had a common mythology across different cultures.
Really?
Yeah. So I had no idea that they were originally Universal Monsters because of the film company.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I know better now. I've known better for years, but that kind of always sticks with me anytime I hear somebody refer to Universal Monsters.
Now, when did you discover that they were actually a series?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago?
No. I don't remember when. It's been a long time, but yeah. So.
Well, it's actually good you brought that up because it's actually strange. This is a movie episode in which we're reviewing 3 different movies, all technically from the same film company.
Yeah.
Like they're all Universal movies. And that's obviously not what was with the Dracula movies. You know, you had a Universal Hammer Horror, and then you had who did the 1992 one? Whoever Francis Ford Coppola's. I'm looking at the poster that's behind me.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, Zoetrope or whatever it is.
Yeah, I can't read the small print there.
Columbia. This says Columbia Pictures. Yeah, it was 3 different film companies, and obviously Frankenstein is the same kind of thing, and so it's really strange that we have this same film company making this, and of course it's decades later. There's nobody really involved in the same, but the fact is that they own this property or something. But we're going to get into it with the first Mummy movie, 1932, The Mummy, starring Boris Karloff,
who was a classic monster actor.
Yes.
Prior to this, he had done Frankenstein.
But yeah, Boris Karloff, it's kind of a bummer that it's good and bad, right? He had an amazing legacy. Obviously played Frankenstein, just a year before this in 1931. Literally the definitive Frankenstein. I mean, there's no, like, when you think of Frankenstein, that's what you think of, is him in that film.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Frankenstein in general, all the Frankenstein, anything, merchandise, or, just when you conjure that picture in your head, all of it's based off of Boris Karloff's Frankenstein.
Herman Munster.
Yeah.
I mean, just anything that is like the stereotypical green Frankenstein with the bolts on the neck and the flat top head.
Yeah.
That's Boris Karloff's image. And he's probably most famous for being Frankenstein. I mean, I hate to say that in some ways because he has so many other good movies. I mean, The Raven with Vincent Price. You have, obviously, The Mummy. You have a lot of, just him collaborating with Roger Corman in like the Edgar Allan Poe story is like so good, but I think he'll always be known, obviously, as Frankenstein. Even though I've heard stories that he wasn't that happy with being characterized as a, just a monster character, but that takes a lot of work. Like, that's almost even more of a compliment. But
yeah,
but that's a thing for a different time, the whole Frankenstein thing. But he is also the Mummy.
Yeah, so, I have stuff, Donnie. Did Bela Lugosi actually dislike Boris Karloff?
That is something that I kind of like that we're getting. I mean, this is stuff I love to talk about. Yeah, and I'm sure people some may.
Well, no, I think a lot of people would be interested in.
Yeah, so I've done a lot of research into that. Actually, there's a great book on Boris Karloff. I forget what it's called, but it's like the most definitive guide to Boris Karloff ever. And there's a lot of different books on Lugosi, obviously. There have been different accounts from different people who work with him. And of course, you got to remember that Bela Lugosi did have a problem with addiction later in his life. Yeah. And so a lot of people, there have been accounts of him later in his life saying things towards Boris Karloff that were less than pleasant. And a lot of people think that might have been a factor in that. Sure. In him saying those things.
Like, my life is so miserable, and if only I had gotten that gig, then I wouldn't be where I am now.
Yeah, sort of that. Stuff. But there was obviously movies where they starred, together. There was what Frankenstein movie is it? There's like one where Boris Karloff is Frankenstein, and then Bela Lugosi is like Igor, plays the Igor character, and it's one of Bela Lugosi's best roles. But there was a whole bunch of stuff where I guess there's a few roles I think that went to Boris Karloff, and I think they weren't offered to Lugosi, or Lugosi thought he might have been better for it. So there was maybe some animosity early on, but yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, when Ed Wood, the movie, came out, there was, because he says like, oh, don't talk about Boris Karloff to me. He has that freak out moment in the film. And some people have discredited that, and some people said, no, I actually heard him say like similar things to this. I mean, it was probably a difficult kind of relationship they had. I mean, Boris Karloff obviously did have much more success later in his career than Bela Lugosi did. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, a lot of the Ed Wood, Bela Lugosi movies are amazing in their own way.
It's true, yeah.
Bride of the Monster, obviously Plan 9. But then, around that same decade, you have Boris Karloff making The Raven. So, these bigger productions by American. I'm sure there was something, that might have been there. But was it as played up as I think it has been in some ways? Probably not. I mean, it's probably just like, dang, I should have got that role. I should have got that role. And, of course, Bela Lugosi felt like he was so typecast. Yeah. As a vampire, or, with his heavy accent. I think it's just a harder road for Lugosi later in his life.
Sure. So there you have it, a resounding maybe.
A resounding maybe. That's pretty much what I can say about it. It's a resounding maybe. There have been people from his family, though, like, there's a whole thing. This is funny. I'm getting way off the sidetrack on this.
It's fine, man. We do it all the time.
There's a whole thing. If we ever do an Ed Wood episode, it'll be interesting. I got to say it again. But there's a whole thing where, like, Bela Lugosi's family tried to dispel some of his rumors. Like, oh, he didn't hate Boris Karloff. He didn't whatever. And then some people from his family were trying to say, like, oh, and Ed Wood took advantage of him and all this stuff. And... like, he was actually miserable, and most of Ed Wood's crew actually stood by Ed Wood and saying, what? They seemed like they were having a great time. Like, yeah, he had, Bela Lugosi had his problems, and, but, at least he got him out of the house and got him to do something, you know? And, but it was really interesting because, the Ed Wood films now, they're kind of revered in how insane they are.
Right.
But at the time, like, there was this gap of time where Bela Lugosi had passed away, and throughout like the 80s and stuff, we were like, oh yeah, Bela Lugosi from Plan 9, and stuff. And his family, like some of his relatives, really just tried to just say, oh, Ed Wood was just a shyster and taking advantage of him, and Ed Wood was a character. Because
it'd be embarrassing, right? To have that associated with you without that being the case.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very interesting.
Anyway. I think Ed Wood was doing Andy Kaufman before Andy Kaufman. I think it was all just one big big gag. Just next level. Nobody really got it.
Yeah.
And Bela was the only one that got it.
Yeah.
And that's why he had such a good time.
I'm sure if we ever take a look at Ed Wood movies, then we'll that's probably what we'll come to in the conclusion of some of those.
That's what I hope to be true. I don't have any faith that it is, but that's what I hope to be true.
Yes, I hope too. Anyway, after that whole big long rant, The Mummy, 1932.
Right. Boris
Karloff. This is a very interesting take on this kind of story. And it's funny because we're going to see the next movie, the 1999 Mummy, kind of expand upon the same idea. You basically have these explorers, they're doing some research down inside of, inside of Egypt. There's this box, right? And this one excavator, he opens a box, and he's attacked by this mummy. And it's a very quick scene, by the way.
He's not really attacked by the mummy.
Oh, well, the mummy puts his hand out, and then he screams.
He freaks out. He has a mental breakdown.
He's a mental breakdown. Yeah. And it's like, oh my gosh, and the whole thing about this box is he says, oh, well, it's a curse. If you open this box, then it's a curse. And they notice when they're excavating the mummy, all these explorers are looking at it, and they notice that, oh, on the coffin, the hieroglyphs have been scratched out and whatever, and all the things inside the coffin saying, oh, well, he was probably banished for something very bad. All this incantations that would protect him in the afterlife, they're gone.
Right. And the seal hadn't been broken, so they know they were gone when he was buried.
Yeah.
Do you think that it was a strategic move on the mummy's part to leave the guy who opened the box alive until later on?
I don't know. I mean, that's just that's fun things I want to talk about it with this. And it's one of the most talked about things with this movie, other than how great it is basically after this guy gets spooked, it's just 10 years later.
Yeah.
It's just 1921 to 1932, modern times. And apparently there was a whole scene filmed where it shows the mummy basically being reincarnated into a human being. So it jumps 10 years, and the mummy he goes by name Ardith Bey. And it's Death by Ra, and it's like an anagram of Death by Ra. Clever. And actually it's kind of clever.
Yeah.
It actually sounds like a real name. But there's been a whole bunch of speculation, or I think there was a whole bunch of stuff shot where it shows how he's basically reincarnated and brought back to, into a modern human body, but it was cut out. And so now it's just kind of I scared this guy. 10 years later, here I am telling these people where to dig.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird. There's also a whole bunch of other stuff that was shot that was just cut out. There's even a character in the credits that isn't even in the movie. Remember we were watching the credits?
Oh, that's right.
The Saxon Guard. It's we were watching it together, and I pointed the credits at the end. I'm like, hey, Brian, that guy's not in the movie because they cut out the scene, but he's in the credits. So there's a whole bunch of stuff during the development of this that they cut out for whatever reason. They think a lot of the reason they cut out the whole reincarnation thing is obviously because it's a belief and it's kind of religious, and sort of they have their reasonings, I guess, for that time. But so Ardith Bey, it's 10 years later, 1932, modern times of this movie. And he's basically pointing everyone to say, oh, we'll dig here and you dig here. And he basically is helping them dig up all these great Egyptian
artifacts and treasures and stuff.
Yeah.
And his girlfriend.
And that's a big part of this is Arth Bay is actually Imhotep, the Imhotep.
Yeah.
And he was a high-ranking member of the society.
He's a priest, right?
Yeah. And he is basically using all these people to try and resurrect his girlfriend.
And then rule.
Yes.
Yeah, rule over Egypt.
That's an important part of this that I was going to leave out.
I rule, he says.
Yeah, and he's trying to get this girl, Helen, to basically... He's going to sacrifice her to bring back his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And that's basically the main plot. It's Mummy comes back, wants to sacrifice modern woman to bring back his girlfriend, and then there's a whole bunch of other people around, like excavators, archaeologists, scientists, who different levels of believing this is happening. And basically, Imhotep just goes and just kills the hell out of everybody and is trying to get his girlfriend back to life.
Hey, man, I know it's been 87 years, but you should put a spoiler alert in there.
Oh, sorry. Did you know?
87 years ago this came out. I just
87 years, yeah.
Yeah, it took me 5 whole minutes to figure
We'll be
it out.
alive maybe when this is 100 years old.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. That's crazy to think, actually. Dang. But this is a great movie.
Yeah,
And
it really is. Even today.
the thing about it is it stands out as very different than a lot of the other Universal movies. I would say The Wolfman, it's kind of closer to The Wolfman than some of the other ones, which is, that's like my favorite Universal movie ever, is the Wolfman, the original one with Lon Chaney Jr. And that's because they focus so much on the monster itself.
Yeah.
Like, you learn so much, you sympathize with the Wolfman so much. And this movie is a lot slower than a lot of those movies. It doesn't have the gothic sets that like are the other ones are so known for. There's no like fog in the cemetery type thing.
Right.
But so it's a very different setting, and it's a little bit slower than some of those, which is saying a lot, because it's much more about the suspense in this one than it is about anything. Like, even in Frankenstein, you have the moments, like, you know, or the monster going out and killing people or whatever. And
Yeah.
even the deaths in this are much slower. You know, he just kind of reaches his hand out. It's kind of like pre-Darth Vader force, where he just reaches out, and then the guy's like, oh, my heart. Like, he's not going in and beating people up to killing them in a big dramatic way. Like, Imhotep just watches from this weird pool TV thing, which is a really bad special effect. And he just reaches out his hand, and then people are just like, and they die.
For the time, though, it's a pretty amazing.
It's pretty crazy special effect. Yeah. Well, I always think about how, I also want to point out that people always think that the 1930s didn't have color movies. The 1930s definitely had many color movies.
We transferred some.
Yes, we did. Yeah, we used to transfer film and lots of other stuff. And let me tell you, there's definitely color film back then. But obviously, majority of movies that wanted to produce under budget would produce things in black and white, because it was insanely expensive.
It was way, way cheaper to do black and white than color, and the film ended up being way more stable.
Yeah, it did, because a lot of the emulsion for like color emulsion, even there's like two strips, what they call two-strip film. It's getting his film nerd stuff, where it was basically red. I think it was red and green or red and blue or whatever. Yeah, it's red and blue, because then you would have this whole color spectrum just gone. You'd have like skin tones and maybe like outfit tones, but it would like be missing a whole bunch. Then we got Technicolor, which is a 3-strip, which is red, yellow, blue, right? Isn't that crazy, Jay?
Yeah.
And that was like amazing. And that's what you have, like Robin Hood, of course, The Wizard of Oz.
Well, the reason those were so amazing too is just because they were black and white film.
Well, it was insanely stable
with a color lens.
Yeah.
So that they would just capture the different colors on a black and white film, and then that way the black and white film, because it was so stable, could then be touched up. They could do, single color adjustments if they needed to.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of stuff they could do, in post to make it look really good.
Yeah. Even the fact that back then when they did the prints, they did the basic colors, and they did a key color. So it could have like the more like a popping contrast in the old prints. Like the old prints look like, if you buy the Blu-ray, it looks a lot different than an actual old print does.
Yeah.
Because of the way they processed it. So even though we have Blu-ray, we're like, oh, that's the definitive way to see it. I'm like, I don't know. It's maybe not even the way that people argue it's not the way the directors.
Wait for the 4K release.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
That'll be the closest to the true if they do it right.
That's true.
Right?
Well, the Blu-ray is already amazing.
For those that don't know, 35 millimeter film is about the equivalent of a 4K res, and that's why if we ever do get remasters in 4K for old films that were in 35 millimeter, that would be probably the closest representation you could get to film as far as accuracy is concerned. Anyway,
that's true. Actually, yeah. And that's why Shout Factory is so cool. And even the Criterion Collection is that they try as much as they can to scan it in 4K, and then kind of downscale it to like a Blu-ray or something. I know that sometimes it's obviously very extremely expensive.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, even just doing a 2K transfer is much cheaper. And for some of those movies that especially Shout Factory does, like sometimes I understand why they choose the 2K, because it's like, hey, we're transferring Hillbilly Killers from Outer Space, and it's like
no one's gonna notice.
And the only other copy of it is like a VHS copy that was like the lowest rate tape. They're like play on EP mode,
right?
And then you look at the tape, and it's like this little tiny like amount of tape that they use to manufacture it. So like sometimes Shout Factory people complain like, why didn't you do a 4K transfer of Hillbillies in Outer Space? And it's just like, I mean,
because you're the only one that wants.
We'll try next time, I guess. There's a few movies I have where they did that, and the movies are really oddball movies. And but people argue that sometimes. I'm just like, do you really need this? I mean, I get it. The whole idea is that like I'm paying for this premium product of this film, but sometimes I'm like, does it really benefit this movie to be in 4K? Sometimes it hurts the movie. Sometimes that VHS lens help the movie be more entertaining.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. Oh, I can see the pores on their faces and stuff, or whatever.
Anyway, the point is there was color film in the 30s.
Yeah.
And Universal was still producing a lot of black and white movies, and they would for many more years. And we also saw this when we talked about the Psycho series, right? 1960, Hitchcock is using black and white.
Yeah.
And by that point, that's kind of a choice. Like, I swear, like, you could have done really cheap color. But here, it was definitely like a lot of movies, it was a balance. It was like, could this movie get made with color? Probably not. Like, that's what people argue about a lot of these films at the time, especially since the budgets weren't so high for a lot of these monster movies. But it has a charm to it. A lot of special effects, they're limited even for the time. I mean, they're really good. They have such a charm to them. Like, the whole intro with, it's like, oh, it's supposed to be the pyramids and the buildings or whatever. And you could tell it's very obviously a little tiny model of a pyramid.
Yeah, but it works. It works for it.
Yeah. Well, this is a pretty good one because we actually watched this on Blu-ray.
Yeah. And
this is a great transfer. Like, that's what I'm saying, like, where with the special effects, you can definitely tell, like, much more obviously.
Yeah.
But I swear, I like it so much more. The movie just automatically gets points for me whenever they have the actual title of the movie as, like, a physical object, instead of it being like just
an overlay.
Yeah, an overlay where it's like a drawn title or something, or we're gonna see CG. I just love that moment in the intro when there's the rotating camera and then it has the pyramid and it has an actual little model that says The Mummy.
Yeah.
Like a little, like probably like plaster, like title that says The Mummy. Like I said, it looks really cheesy by today's standards, and you could definitely tell like, oh, that's a model.
Yeah.
But it just gets so many more points because I just love whenever they actually incorporate it into something physical.
It's kind of like MST3K. If you've seen Mystery Science Theater 3000, all of that stuff is a mini model, and they're kind of spoofing that old style doing that. But when that was the best way to do it, they had to do it well, and you can tell when they did it well.
Yeah, exactly. And this has some pretty good, some pretty surprisingly good shots of like mats in the background or little model shots that become mats.
Yeah.
You could tell like sometimes when I think there's a shot where like Helen's looking off the terrace and you could tell like very obviously that's a little model set that she's looking out towards, and like the coloring isn't even the same, like the contrast like clashes with it. But things like that, it just gives it a lot of character for me. And I just really love this era of film because it was so creative.
Yeah, little things like that don't actually pull you out of suspended disbelief. Like they don't really detract from the movie.
No, it's because it's kind of like a dream like to it. It kind of it's a more surreal kind of atmosphere to it.
Yeah.
And that's because the acting in this movie is really good. And like you can tell they're really committing to this. I'm sure it was probably really hard back then to go like, imagine there's pyramids or something like that.
Right.
And they seemed to do it pretty well. I mean, it was very early days of film. They also reused Swan Lake in the intro. So the actual credits are the same as Dracula. I mean, like not the actual title sequence, but the music is the exact same as Dracula. It's because they're like, hey, we figured out that time, right? It worked this time.
And we got the rights to it, so, might as well.
Yeah, right? They're like, Swan.
We already have a recording of, a symphony playing it, so.
Yeah, might as well just do it. It's great. Ardith Bay and Emotep. I'll call him Ardith Bay because that's what he's known as for most of the movie. The one thing that's kind of weird about this movie, and it was kind of controversial at the time in some ways for kind of adapting the Egyptian culture. Some people kind of found it like, well, you have Boris Karloff playing this Egyptian like priest, and some people, I think even at the time, a group of people found it kind of offensive. Like, okay, like this guy obviously is not like Egyptian at all, and he's supposed to be this high priest and stuff. And then of course now that kind of stuff is under much more scrutiny. But Boris Karloff he's just such a good actor.
Well, that, and he was willing to sit through 8 hours of makeup.
Oh yeah, it's 8 hours. So there's very few shots in the movie that actually are him in the bandages and everything, but it literally took 8 hours to put him inside of that. And apparently he was so matted down from all the crap they put on him that he couldn't even like open his mouth to speak anymore. Like he's seriously dedicated.
Yeah.
For like a few minutes of footage.
And apparently he ended up with like permanent scarring because of the makeup.
Yeah, ripping it off and trying to remove it. Yeah, well, he also for Frankenstein, he says because they did spirit gum for the bolts.
Oh yeah. And electrodes.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. That's right. They're not bolts. They're electrodes. That's what Jack Pierce said.
Right.
But that's the makeup artist for the Mummy. And yeah, it's a great performance. I mean, the story is kind of basic in a lot of ways. It has a lot of twists and turns, but the thing about these kind of movies, you got to remember, everybody's talking about nowadays, well, I saw it coming. Well, I saw the ending coming. It's like...
Well, yeah, but you also went and watched Titanic, so,
Yeah, right?
Get over it.
Yeah,
enjoy it for the movie.
That's it. It's like people don't... Like, this is a movie where, yeah, right in the beginning, once you see Ardith Bay, you're like, that guy's a mummy. I'm like, he's it. He's a mummy. Like... Oh,
I'm so glad you figured it out. We can stop watching now.
Yeah, you're like, that's the mummy. You're like, oh my gosh. Wrap it up. Turn off.
Right. Why waste our time on this?
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next one.
Exactly. So there's no point in, that kind of reasoning with this movie because it's very obvious. And it is kind of cool. I like it when they do the flashback sequences to where, it's actually supposed to be like old school, like when it shows Emotep trying to get the scrolls of life to resurrect his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And I laughed so hard. There's like the statue of is it Anubis, and the arm moves over like
right.
He's like Emotep is getting the scrolls out of the box, and the arm moves over, and I just laugh so hard every time. It's the dopiest looking statues, and the movement of the arm is so bad and stiff that it just makes me crack up. All the statues and a lot of the designs and stuff, they tried.
They did, yeah.
They tried, but by today's standards, they look extremely dopey because the way they sculpted them, it's like the eyes just look so funky, and like a lot of them just look really angular and doesn't really resemble anything we see in a lot of Egyptian movies today.
Well, in 1932, I'm sure that they weren't expecting everybody to have been, exposed to any of that culture, really.
Yeah.
And so they could kind of cheat a little with accuracy on visuals.
Yeah, apparently they had I think there was some sort of expert or researcher they had that helped them. I mean, you got to keep in mind, 30s, this is way ahead of everyone else still on this kind of subject.
They couldn't just Google what it looked like.
Yeah, exactly.
I might have blown some minds just now.
Well,
like,
yeah.
What? But
not only could you not Google it, but like you had to hopefully go to a library, and then they would have maybe a book, or if they didn't have the book there, they could maybe somebody who physically worked there. You could talk to them, and they get the name of a book to then request for, if they couldn't get it, request a bookstore that's a different building than that library, some part of town, which you would then have to locate to see if they can special order that book, because they would be the only people that had the information to contact the company to find the book.
Yeah, by looking at a paper map, no less.
Yeah.
Where you don't even know, you have to find which streets. There's no "you are here" dot on that map. Man, things were tough in the 1930s.
Dude, sometimes it's crazy to think that, like, when I used to have to pull out a map to do things.
Yeah, all good old Thomas guide, man.
Yeah. I remember the first GPS I got, that thing got me so many tickets because it was just like, it just didn't understand tolls or anything. So I just had to know, like, I'm like, this thing's
can't go that way.
I'm like, this thing's taking me out of toll, and you couldn't like reroute it or anything.
Yeah.
It would just, oh God, it's so weird to think that, you know. And then when like MapQuest and all that came out, I would go and, you remember even when you first met me and we started to have better GPS.
Yep.
I would go and pull up MapQuest at work, like when I was leaving, and then write down the directions. And then Drew would be like, "Are you writing down the directions from MapQuest?" I'm like, "Yeah, so I don't get lost."
Yep.
Because I that's how bad GPS was. Like, even just not even that long ago. And plus, it like used up so much data, and nobody had any data. Never mind.
Yeah.
This is 1930s.
This is griping about recent ancient technology versus ancient technology.
This is the 1930s when this happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, this movie was a big success. So much so that it has an insane amount of sequels. For this particular one, like, there actually were a lot of sequels, obviously, to Universal like monster movies. Obviously, Frankenstein had Ghost of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein. The Mummy had a ton, but was weird because like the movies aren't like really sequels to this one, because they kind of just switch up the story. They use
kind of a Zymox thing.
Yeah, kind of a Zymox.
Yeah. Oh, we have this name. Let's use it. It's not really the same thing, but people watch it.
And then later they're like, oh, they're all sequels. You know, like they're all like today. It's like yeah, it has sequels, but it's not really the same thing. Plus, it uses a lot of stock footage. Like the other ones use stock footage from the first one. Gotcha. And they're okay. I mean, they're just really different. Eventually, Lon Chaney actually becomes the Mummy, but it like he is some of the worst ones. We might talk about it. Maybe we'll do like a bonus episode or something. Yeah,
I do want to end up watching the rest of them. They're all pretty short, right? They're all around an hour or less.
Yeah, by the end, I think it's like, well, plus especially by the stock footage, you can even fast forward past some stock footage, same thing.
Sure. And
it's just like, I think some of the movies are like almost under an hour long. Like they're really short movies. But yeah, this had 4 sequels. You had The Mummy's Hand, The Mummy's Tomb, The Mummy's Ghost, and The Mummy's Curse. And then of course you also had Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. So this had a legacy, and it was a profitable film. By the way, all those sequels also came way later. They were in the 40s. So a lot of people just thought it was a cash-in attempt to kind of be like, oh, well, The Mummy was successful, and well, let's make some sequels.
Did that again in 99 and then again in 2017.
Yeah, right, yeah. They'll try.
We'll see. You know what? We can't wait for the 2027 version.
That's it. But yeah, the Mummy 1932, it's great. I'll say for a modern audience, here's one of my biggest criticisms of it, because I think this movie is just a classic for what it is. It's really hard for me to really nitpick about a lot of these old Universal films, because they're so great and they were good at the time, and now they're just amazing still. But if you're a totally modern person, this is going to be somewhat of a hard watch for you. I know a lot of people have trouble watching black and white movies. As far as I know, this doesn't have a full colorized version of it. I will say that this movie, because the sound is so old, I did find sometimes it's hard to understand the actual audio because the clarity is so bad. So usually if I watch this movie, I watch it with some subtitles. It just helps get the plot across, because they're also saying a lot of really funky Egyptian words. So it just helps. But I thought I would say that for a modern audience. And if you're looking for something that just holds up, I think for the better palette of modern taste, I would say Frankenstein is probably the best one, or The Wolfman for a starter, and then maybe watch The Mummy after that. Just because The Mummy is, like we said, it's a little bit slower than the other ones, a little bit more talking. It's a little more of a suspense film. Until the very end, there's not a ton of action, at least direct action that we see on screen. So That's basically my only criticism of it. I guess it's not even really criticism. It's more of a beware. Buyer beware.
Just expect slower pacing. They take longer for character development scenes and exposition. And it's a good watch, definitely.
There we go.
Are we done with
We're done
the
with
Mummy?
this.
Yeah, okay. You want to talk about really interesting Goth things?
Recent
stuff?
Random interesting.
Random interesting.
Is it recent?
Recent? I don't know.
What is it?
This Riggs, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You want to talk about Riggs?
Yes.
Okay.
So it is time for random interesting Goth stuff.
A.k.a. Riggs.
So we have a very serious story to open this up, and of course this was sent to the show pretty much the second it happened. Peter Murphy unfortunately suffered a heart attack on August 13th, and he had to be rushed to the hospital. Apparently they put stents in his heart. Like I think it's what do they do, put it in your like artery or whatever
to open up the channel so blood can get through.
Yeah, and that's obviously extremely scary, extremely frightening. And as of this moment, I don't even think there's been an update that, like he's being treated. But as far as I know, there hasn't been really issued another statement since then. The family is saying, okay, well, he'll be back. Thanks for all the support. And of course, he was doing a residency at the time, performing a whole bunch of his albums in full, and it was right in like the middle. He was basically getting started with it, and then obviously that's all been postponed because of that. Super serious. I mean, geez, it's very sad, and something that is very hard to it can impact for a long time. I mean, one of the things that happened with David Bowie, he was playing a show, and then of course he had a massive heart attack. This was like years ago. I think it was like 2006 or something. And had a massive heart attack coming off stage, and then they basically had to do the same thing. They had to go in and perform like bypass surgery for him. And then, there's a few performances where you can see he was really rough after that, and he never really did any touring again. Of course, he still made music and did a lot of things, and he said, I'm just not going to tour anymore.
Right.
But to me, that really brought back my memory of that happening, where it was this very serious event where he had to go in and have this like quadruple bypass for his heart, and then he never really did any performing again. Of course, I think Peter Murphy, he would probably be one of those people who it wouldn't, like, as soon as he could get up there, he would probably play. I think Peter Murphy really likes performing live, but this is like so scary, and it kind of is one of those things where you start to really realize how serious some of this stuff is. And he hasn't been that shy about some of his choices of substances, and
right.
Of course in the public, he has been arrested. I think it was for methamphetamine a few years ago. Of course, not even a year ago, there was that whole thing where he was on stage and fighting with the bodyguards and stuff, and they took him down to the ground, and there's all this stuff. So some of that lifestyle can be a little bit more rough on certain parts of your body than, just maybe like Weird Al's lifestyle or something.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's very sad, and of course I wish him well, but yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, it does.
Thanks, Brian.
There's a moment of silence for Peter Murphy to get better.
Yeah, I know.
So hopefully we don't have to have a longer one later.
I know, exactly. But yeah, I thought I would start with that one because it is a pretty heavy story, and a lot of people sent us that link pretty much the moment it happened. So in lighter news, Dracula 1979 is being released through Scream Factory. They're going to update it, like it's going to do a Blu-ray for it. It includes an HD transfer, and this is one of the reasons I want to mention this is because it includes both the theatrical version and the director's version. Now, the director for the 1979 Dracula went back and added a whole bunch of film grain and like a yellow filter over his really good movie, but he did that later. And so there's never really been one that includes both versions of it.
Right.
And so, me, I always prefer the original versions of stuff majority of the time. Especially, I don't like fake film grain. They also did with the French Connection. Basically, it ruined the movie. Gotcha. But I thought I would say that. So if you're looking, you can pre-order that, and it's going to have a whole bunch of different stuff.
Sometimes it works to the movie's advantage. I don't know if I've told you this, and this is a little bit off subject, but
That's
when
fine.
I first watched Brick, I thought it was way more gritty and noir than it actually was. I mean, it's pretty for the movie. It's pretty gritty and noir, but what I didn't realize is that the version that I was watching, a friend had given to me, was a cam version, like somebody snuck into the movie theater.
Oh.
So the audio, there was a lot of audio missing out of it, and the image quality kind of looked, a little older and grainy and whatever else, because the camera was having a hard time picking up the light. And I thought that that's the way the movie was for a few years. And then when I watch it now, I'm like, oh man, there's something missing. Because I actually prefer that. I gotta get my hands on that version. I own the actual release now, but
I'll recreate it for you.
yeah, we got to do that. Sometimes it works to the
I'll make a
to the
screen
benefit of the
and
film.
I'll film the screen for you.
Yeah, just sit across the room and
That's what I'll
record
do.
it with a medium grade camera.
That's what I'll do.
And every once in a while, walk in front of it.
Good.
That wasn't in my version, but that's what I've come to
You want
expect.
the full experience.
Yeah, and if you can make my floor extra sticky. The other thing I wanted to talk about, as far as added stuff or whatever from a producer, how do you explain Blade Runner then?
Oh, well, Blade Runner is a different one. It kind of, I mean, that's one that I still actually have some qualms with as far as the way some of that remastering was done. I do think that the color correction they did on it is maybe a little bit unnecessary. They made the movie a lot more blue, a lot cooler, heavier contrast on some scenes. Blade Runner itself, it's pretty much the director's cut is where you could have stopped with it in the 90s. Honestly, no version of Blade Runner is really that bad, but
see, it's not always bad. That's my point.
But that's one where it's very similar. I think Ridley Scott did it a smart way, like, because he also fixed a lot of the issues with the original one, where like the strings you could see pulling up the cars, like he CG'd out the strings.
Gotcha.
Like there was these huge, I mean, big thick wires you could see pulling the cars up in the original ones, and it's just like, I gotta say that really, like, when you take that out, it really helps immerse you into it. There's another thing here. There's actually going to be a Disney anti-princess that's going to be introduced for the Disneyland theme park. So she's basically going to be a Disney anti-princess. Her name is going to be Shelley Marie. So she's going to be a kind of goth-looking character.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah, for this Halloween season, they're introducing this character, and it should be a thing within kind of the parks for this season. But it's designed by Disney animator Eric Goldberg, who worked on Hercules, Moana, Aladdin, and the character is described as a mashup of Wednesday Addams and Lydia from Beetlejuice. So it's kind of interesting that they're kind of, like, Disney is embracing the whole goth thing right now. That must mean it's extremely popular.
Yeah.
Of course, Vampirina, I think, was that Disney? Vampirina was a big hit, and all these other little kids shows that have these things. Of course, Monster High has been popular for years, but
right.
I think Vampirina was like a big smash hit for a certain audience, and they're trying to cash in on that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of cashing in and Wednesday, the Addams Family trailer has been released. It was released.
The full one,
full trailer, official trailer, August 7th, and they've set a release date of October 11th in theaters.
That's funny. That's been set since last year, I think. I think when I did the Crow review. Oh, wait, maybe not. When did I do that? Anyway, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm so excited.
So it doesn't look like they're pushing. It's gonna be the.
I know that's gonna be the date.
Yeah.
I know, which was so surprising to me. I can't wait for it. I'm very excited to go see the Addams Family. I just nothing could be worse than the 1974 Addams Family cartoon. I don't even think anything could be worse than that. Or is it 73, 74? Whatever that year was released.
Yeah, go look at the thing that you made.
Oh my gosh! If you want to look at the GothCast 1970s Addams Family cartoons review, it is so bad.
That's all you need to know. Don't even have to watch it.
It's terrible. I don't think anything could be worse than that. Anyway, I won't let it fester.
That's good. It was bad, but it was good.
That's good.
I almost didn't catch it.
Yeah.
They've announced the lineup for the HRH Goth Festival in London and Sheffield. There's going to be a lot of decent artists there, including Fields of Nephilim, My Dying Bride, KMFDM, The Web, Massive Ego, Seething Akira, this is a bunch of different people.
Yeah.
So it's going to be September 12th and 13th in 2020. So they're actually like, it's a year away, more than a year away, and they're already announcing like who's going to be playing. So there's a big flipping deal.
They must need the money for pre-orders or something.
So yeah, apparently they've had people vote on who they want the lineup to be. It's like 189,000 fans.
Jeez.
After 2 years of research, they're happy to stage chapter 1 in a format that hopefully does them all proud. So tickets are on sale, actually, for that event already.
Jeez.
You can get them at the HRH Goth website.
My gosh.
Apparently, they're offering early bird specials and hotel deals. So if you know that that's something that you want to do, go and get those now.
Guess we'll have to order.
Yeah, and then we have to, figure out plane tickets and whatever.
In a year.
A year from now will be the best time to buy the plane tickets in order to get the best price. Unless you want to risk buying plane ticket futures.
I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
It'll be really cheap.
We could buy up all the plane tickets and then scalp them for an extra $2 or $3. And we would make hundreds to thousands of dollars that we could then put into better equipment.
I like it.
All we need is several million to get going.
Okay.
Yeah, we could make hundreds of thousands.
That's the easy part.
Yeah, if we just spend a couple million now.
A year ahead of time with no results until we're like, no, people are going to want these tickets to go to this event.
So, yeah, go get your tickets to go see Jace Lewis and so on and so much.
I like it.
So on and on and on.
A quick interruption to your normal Riggs programming. Really quick, inside of Riggs, I wanted to cover a book that I actually got for review, which I thought people might find interesting. The book is called Fiendilkfjeld Castle, and spelled Fiendilkfjeld. And this is written by Matthew Pungatore, or maybe Pungatore. Sorry if I butchered any of the pronunciation of those words. The last name of the author is spelled Pungitore. So Matthew had written this book and reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in reading this and kind of talking about your opinions on it? And here we are. He has released another book, a previous book, called Midnight's Eternal Prisoner. He came to me with the summary or kind of an idea of what this book was. I said, yeah, I'm interested. When he finished it up, he said, okay, well, here, send it off. And I did read through the entire book, and it's a very interesting book. It has a lot of really good ideas, and I'll kind of share my thoughts on it. So the basic plot revolves around a man named Theodomir Fiendilkfjeld, and he is seeing this woman, Allison, in his dreams. And his life is not necessarily what he wants. He is wealthy, but he has a lot of kind of leech-like friends who take advantage of his wealth and are always asking him for money and kind of pressuring him to do things that he doesn't want to do, which is, a lot of seedy things like digging up graves and different things like that. So he's not very happy with his current situation. And there's a detective who comes into the picture named Roman, who comes around saying, oh, I'm looking for this woman named Allison. And, from the photo, Theodomir is like, oh, this is the woman I'm seeing in my dreams. The detective is kind of sly about it. He's saying, kind of being like, well, I've been watching you and, I know what you do, and not saying he's going to throw him under the bus for grave robbing or all the illegal things that he does. But he said, oh, well, I was hired by your family, or I know them, the Fiendilkfjeld family, and this is a very noble family, and they're well known, and they reside in this castle. They say, oh, well, I'm looking for this woman named Allison, and I believe that she's being kept in this castle. Will you help me, Theodomir? And so they journey to this castle, and actually the first part of the book, you have like 4 designated sections of the book and then chapters within those, so I hope that makes sense. But after they reach the castle is when it really picks up into a very, very dark, Gothic novel. Not saying that it isn't in the beginning, but the setup is kind of different than the later parts of the book, which I did like. There is a lot of suspense and a lot of mystery built up in this, and there's a lot of different twists and a lot of things that are set up in this book that I really like. It's definitely things that I did not expect to happened in later chapters of this book, and that's something I really appreciate. You know, I always say that the worst thing you can be is boring, you know, whether that's music, movies, books, novels, you know, like, but this book was not that. I will say that I really did like the variety of characters in this book, and I really like the supremely Gothic dressing, you know, when describing the environments and even a lot of the different creatures and things to this, because the book does have a number of supernatural elements to it, which I always like, of course. You have vampires, werewolves, kind of specters and ghosts and creatures, and there's a lot of strange things that happen relating to dreams and the idea of souls. So it has a lot of elements that I really like. And overall, I think it's a really well-written book. My biggest criticism, I guess, is that some of the characters, especially Theodomir, at times to me felt extremely brooding, you know, in that he just really seemed to just hate everyone all the time. There were moments where he did seem to almost kind of break through that, and there would be passages where his personality kind of changes for a little bit. I'm like, okay, he's kind of breaking through that. But I just felt that he was so angry and bitter towards the world. And I do like books and stories and, you know, movies, and I've said it on this podcast a number of times that I do really like happy endings and characters where in the end they get what they wanted. I like it when the characters kind of have the sort of moment where they come through the fog and they're kind of better people. And at times I felt like Theodomir's actions didn't necessarily match up with what was going on, or his personality just kind of flip-flop back and forth at times. And this is mostly for the later part of the book. I mean, they are pretty consistent throughout most of the novel. And then in kind of the later sections, I did notice that it kind of changes his mind a lot, or it just doesn't seem like there's enough time that passes in the book for him to change his mind that rapidly. And there is a lot in the book about kind of manipulation of the mind and your perceptions of reality. So that could be an element of it where his personality does seem to kind of go back and forth between these different things, but it's understandable in that context. I'm just saying, you know, I like it better whenever there's maybe a little bit more of the walking into the sunset sort of thing. And maybe not to that great of an extent, but, you know, I kind of know the sort of endings I like for books. So yeah, that's really kind of more of a personal take on that. I really did think that a lot of people would like this novel. I will say that the violence in this book definitely ratchets up to a pretty large degree. It's very violent, very bloody. So if that's sort of your thing, then this book would definitely satiate that need. The supernatural elements of the book were definitely my favorite. I like what he does with the werewolf and vampiric elements of the book, and just the supernatural creatures that are described in the book. It really paints a good picture of these gigantic beasts and these horrible, horrible creatures that are hurting people. And that just really, really got to me. I really, really enjoyed that part. I just think that the pessimistic view probably wasn't to my taste in this, and some of the kind of message that the world really isn't that great, or, you know, kind of screw everything element to it, it just didn't cater to me that much. I guess I just kind of give people the benefit of the doubt a little bit on a lot of these things. I kind of like the outlook in the end. They're like, oh yeah, the world is screwed up, but, you know, everything's good. You know, it's like we're all trying to do our own thing, but this has very, very dark, very deep elements that are kind of looking at the world as if it's pathetic, and that's totally fine. Like I said, I'm just kind of expressing it in my own opinion. I'm kind of presenting it in my own way, and that's kind of what I took from it. I think a lot of people probably look at the same book and view it a different way, and I don't think it necessarily detracts from it. I'm just saying that as far as that, most of the characters seem to have a pessimistic view on humanity. That's probably very, very appealing to a lot of people. Overall, I did enjoy my time reading Fiendilkfjeld Castle, and I really hope I'm pronouncing that right, but I really did enjoy it, and a lot of the elements in it, I really think a lot of people would enjoy themselves. And maybe the ending and some of the other elements weren't for my particular taste. I mean, I'm pretty sure that if you're a regular listener to this podcast, then you kind of know what I'm saying as far as, you know, the kind of endings I like. I maybe like them a little bit sappier, but I still think overall it's a really good book. You can pick it up through barnesandnoble.com. You can just search the name. It's Fiendilkfjeld Castle. And again, the author is Matthew Pungator. I really hope I'm saying that right too. Matthewpungitore. So if you like dark Gothic novels that have a lot of supernatural elements in them, this is the book for you. And of course, you like the bloody parts of it, and you like a little bit of a darker take on humanity and those sorts of things, then I really recommend this book. Also, if you want to check out the author's Instagram, he does have one. It is Matthew Pungator Author, and that's MatthewPungitoreAuthor. Again, that's his Instagram, and you can find links to purchase the book. And I just check it out if you're interested, if any part of that sounded interesting. Yeah, hope you enjoyed this book review. And it was a lot of fun for me to check out. All right, now returning to your normal Riggs programming. Well,
that's all I've got.
Those are my things. Yeah, that's all I got. Well, some pretty serious things, some pretty lighthearted things, some pretty strange things, some good schemes. And that has been Random Interesting Gossip. Let's get back to The Mummy. Not The Mummy, but
the Mummy.
Yeah. Let's go to a time when Len's Steal My Sunshine was a big hit. Was that 1999?
Probably. Yeah.
The year that Kleine Zamax released Creatures.
That's weird to think about.
Yes.
That Creatures and Steal My Sunshine.
Same year?
Same year.
Or at least very close.
Yeah.
Anyway, Brian, this was probably the most famous Mummy movie that we're talking about today, that probably most people have seen. Anyway, this is a big hit, a huge thing, and this is The Mummy, released in 1999, starring Brendan Fraser.
Not to be confused with the one we just did called The Mummy.
No relations, somewhat, sort of.
Yeah. Only related by the fact that one's based off the other and they were produced by the same company.
Yeah. Other than that, completely unrelated.
Especially because the last movie was a horror movie, and this is a comedy action with elements of horror. There's a huge difference.
That's very true.
Yeah.
This was well, first off, somebody I know really likes this movie, and they knew who they are. This was a very important movie for a lot of people. That's because it spawned a ton of things. I mean, this was a big, it's hard to imagine. This was a huge movie at the time. I mean, this was big. I remember Fangoria magazine had like specials on it, and you can actually see some of the early special effects in that article about it. I do want to say one thing I'm not mentioning. Well, I guess I'm mentioning it, but we're not going in depth on it. There was a Mummy released of 1959, and it was produced by Hammer, the same people who did the Frankenstein, like all those great movies.
Right.
They did that, and they actually released 3 sequels to that one. So there's actually a total of 4 Hammer Mummy series. And some of the elements from those movies were put into this movie as well. So it's kind of...
So in total, this is number 10?
Well, this would be... Actually, kind of, yeah. If you're counting all the movies from the original Universal...
That's 5.
That's 5. Yeah. And then there'd be 4 from Hammer.
Yeah.
And this. And it is kind of an amalgamation of a little bit elements of each series. But I thought I would mention the Hammer films just because, it's relevant to this. There are, I've seen all those ones, and it has a lot more of that action sort of thing to it. And, of course, the dry sort of wit and humor of Hammer in some parts of it. But I thought I would mention that just because this Mummy movie, 1999, if you look at a lot of documentaries, and we even watch one where they're like, oh, we pulled so much from the 1932 one. It's like, yeah, but you also pulled it from this other one, but you don't own those movies.
Yeah, you can't mention it on this thing.
Yeah.
because you'll get in trouble.
Yeah. But this was a very big movie and a really great one. I mean, I really had a fun time with this movie. It also spawned a TV series, by the way, a cartoon series,
right?
Which we did watch some.
Yeah.
Where is Alex?
If you watch this with I have to be really critical of this movie in order to like point out, like I have to be really nitpicking to point out stuff that I didn't like in this movie. And if I'm being nitpicky, there's a few things with Foley that were problematic for me.
The sound design.
Yeah, the sound design.
Well, I'll say here's some positive stuff
Sure.
first. So your main characters are Rick O'Connell, played by Brendan Fraser. You have Rachel Weisz as Evie. You have Arnold Vosloo as Imhotep, which is really cool.
Oh, I thought he was playing Voldemort.
Yeah. Oh, he who should not be named.
Yeah.
That's right. That's so funny. You have John Hannah as Jonathan Carnahan, who is Evie's brother. You have Kevin O'Connor as Benny. Benny.
Benny's fantastically acted.
Yeah. Actually, you have another Ardith Bay. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
You have Ardith Bay, but he's, instead of him being the mummy this time, he is actually trying to stop the mummy. But it's kind of done as a reference to the original one. He's
an homage.
Yeah. Like, the characters in this, so much more comedic.
Oh, yeah.
And, but it's essentially the same thing. Like, the story itself is pretty much the same as the original, just done in a very, very different way. You have Imhotep as a high priest. He loves Anck-su-namun, the woman, and he comes back, and, like, it was the same thing. Like, Imhotep is all over the pharaoh's girl, and he's just like, okay, this princess is amazing. I'm willing to die and stuff for her, because he doesn't care. But it's essentially the same thing, where he tries to get the scrolls, revive the princess, because they killed the pharaoh, Imhotep and Anck-su-namun. Then Anck-su-namun kills herself and says, well, you need to bring me back. And so he goes and tries to get the scrolls to bring her back to life, and then, just like the other movie, is killed in process and has all the incantations and everything taken off of the coffin. It's just, I mean, it's literally exactly the same. Like, what, does it sound familiar?
Yeah. In the last movie, it was the pharaoh's daughter.
Oh, okay.
That's what, she's a princess, and he's a high priest, so
there you go.
Off limits.
Yeah. So in this, they do actually kind of play up the relationship between them a lot more. I believed it so much more in this one.
Absolutely. There seems to be a reason for all the different actions they take. The actions they take are believable based on the way the characters are portrayed. Out of all of the ones that we're doing today, all three of them, I think this has actually got the most believable story as far as the relationships are concerned.
Absolutely. Yeah. You really believe, and it's like in the original, it comes off as really strange in the 1932 one that he's so into Helen and is like, oh, you will be like my princess, whatever. And he's pretty much just like, all right, let me kill the heck out of you. And instead of this one, it's pretty much like the concept is the same. Like, oh, there's a modern woman who he's going to kill to revive his princess. But he's not like, hey, I really like you. Like, I love you. You're my princess, whatever. Like in the original one. And then like at the very last second, like, oh, you need to kill yourself.
Right.
In this one, it's much more of a, oh, you will be sacrificed. Like, I need you specifically to do this. And it comes off so much better than, especially the movie we're going to talk about after this. But I really did believe it. And then, of course, Rick O'Connell and Evie in this movie, like, actually, this has so much chemistry.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a good, like, it's like a rom-com in a lot of ways, like a romantic comedy between them, in that Brendan Fraser, like, in the very beginning, he is part of this army that's trying to get into here to get treasure, right? And he gets captured, and then he's in prison, he's going to hang, whatever, and Evie comes and rescues him so she can get the information from him to be, where's the forbidden, city of the dead? And that's basically what kicks it all off.
Right. All the motivations seem to make sense in here.
Yeah, which is so funny because it's just it's a total comedy action movie with, I mean, the mummy. I mean, it's just, but it just works so well. And it, in some ways it shouldn't, and in some ways it's really dopey. I mean, you have a lot of comedic relief in this movie, a lot. And I think if you're going into it knowing that, then it's totally fine. But people nowadays who I know there's a lot of criticism for movies nowadays by some people that, well, there's so many jokes, like everything's a joke, like in so many of these movies, and there's a lot of one-liners in here, or there's a lot of really goofies like, let's get out of here, you know, or a lot of like somebody doing this and he's like, let's go, you know, sort of just these little quips, and that's kind of leads into sound design somewhat, that they just always have to be doing something. In my opinion, I thought it was kind of funny.
Yeah, no, I liked it. And anybody who says it's not, you know, a horror film, really,
Ugh.
I will direct your attention to the scarab under the skin scene. That's all I needed to be creeped out.
Oh, God. Yeah, there's some like really gross moments in this, and that's probably number one. There's scarabs, these little beetles, and this guy's trying to steal them all because they're like, oh, they look all shiny and stuff. And he drops one in the sand, and it turns like it actually kind of becomes alive, and it gets into his boot and then crawls inside his skin and is crawling up his body, and he's trying to stop it. Like he pulls off his shirt and you could see the ball where the scarab is crawling up his skin and then goes up his neck and into his brain.
Yeah, and unlike Scorpion King, it's actually hard to discern that it's CG.
Oh my god,
that's doing it. I mean, it's very realistic looking, and it is pretty horrifying. I'm actually more afraid of those scarabs than I am of the mummy in the movie.
Emotep, like, man, well, that's the thing is, like, Emotep is
super overpowered.
He is insanely overpowered. He has just a billion powers inside of this. So when you see Emotep, like when he first comes out of this, it's the same story, by the way. They go in, they open the box, and like after they discover the mummy, they do all the same stuff. Like, oh, the inscriptions are cut off. Blah, blah. He must have been like done something really bad.
But in this one, they say that he was mummified alive.
Yeah, they say he's mummified alive.
In the 1932 movie, they say he was buried alive.
Yeah.
And that's an important distinction because you can't really mummify someone alive. You just can't really. I mean, when you start to scramble their brains or remove organs, like they just kind of die on you.
Yeah,
that's a big problem with mummification of a living person, is that they're not alive long enough to actually proceed with mummification.
Yep, that really bothered you.
That really bothered me because it's like, why would you say something so obviously inaccurate? But anyway,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's my biggest gripe, I think, for the movie. That and the sound design. You know, some of the Foley stuff just had me, and it wasn't really stuff done wrong. It was just stuff that I felt was missing.
Well, they were also like a lot of stuff. It was meant to be so big. Yeah. Like it was meant to be like, whoa,
over
like,
the top.
Yeah.
And they achieved that. They accomplished that.
Yeah. What scenes do you notice stuff missing?
Like when they're on the boat, there's no ocean noises.
Oh.
There's no footsteps of people walking around on the wooden deck. You know, there's stuff that's going on where, you know, there should be noises that people notice, or that we would be hearing. There's multiple scenes where somebody snuck up on where it would be impossible to sneak up on somebody and have them not hear you
with the environment.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever walked on sand on a hard surface?
Yes.
Like silently? You can't. No. You can't do it. Because it just, any little amount of motion and pressure just makes it, you know, grind. So there's stuff like that just kind of, you know, pulls me out of it a little bit as far as kind of
nitpicking
immersion. Yeah. But really, when you sit back and relax, right, it's just a movie.
Yeah, and that's what this movie wants you to do. It is funny because when you see Emotep first as like the weird skeleton, especially when he gets eyes, that's when it's so ridiculous.
Yeah,
like he gets the eyes. So once he opens it, the people who open the box, they're cursed to basically give themselves, like Emotep's going to seek them down and then use their bodies to restore himself. Which, by the way, remember I was like, what if one dude opened it?
Yeah.
Does that mean like he only has to kill one dude?
Kill one dude, you got all the organs you need right there.
Because like 4 people open it.
Because he's literally stealing their organs in order to get his body back. So he's taking the eyes and the tongue and whatever else.
Their skin.
Yeah, their skin, everything.
Yeah. But when you see Emotep when he's like still it's just a mess, like he's basically a skeleton with some skin on it, and then the eyes and the thing. There's this shot where like he comes after Rick, of course, when he shoots him with the shotgun, and like it jumps towards the screen. It's just so over the top. It's just really cartoony and the way the CG in this movie moves. And it's 1999. I get it, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of the CG there's a problem that a lot of stuff today even has is weight, in that whenever stuff moves around very, with no weight, it's very noticeable because it just looks so cartoony. And this is one of those movies where you can tell very much when it's a human and then when it's CG, because the CG parts of it, they just are as light as a feather.
Yeah, it's effortless movement, which looks odd to us.
Yeah, and then whenever, like, especially near the end scene where there's they're fighting all the undead servants, the guys with the little
shields and
all that stuff.
Yeah,
and you could tell very much whenever it's real people, and then whenever it switches to CG, it works for this because the movie is so over the top. I just really liked the characters in this, and it's because they're so distinct. Rick is basically every action hero rolled into one, and like he's like Egyptian John McClane. A lot of stuff is ridiculous. He's very macho, but he's also like Indiana Jones, that he stumbles a lot and barely makes it through everything anyway.
It actually reminds me a little bit of Mal from Firefly, who's the actor that plays him, Nathan Fillion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it reminds, Brendan Fraser kind of reminds me of Nathan Fillion a little bit, and that they have some kind of similar acting styles and different things they do with, the kind of like the smart aleck quips and one-liners and, the action and the stumbling around and kind of being a little bit everyman and a little bit hero, who just happens to make it through with his, by the skin of its teeth on a regular basis kind of thing, Yeah, if you haven't watched it, give it a watch. Yeah,
it's great. And the Brendan Fraser commentary is very funny. It's Brendan Fraser saying he just mostly watches it and then just does the sound effects. Like he's just like, they're like right in the beginning when there's all, and Emotep and Oxynom are like beating up people. He's like, pow, that's funny. Pow, oh yeah, that's gonna get him. Oh no, can't believe you did that. I'm like, who? Why is he doing this?
He's contractually obligated to do commentary.
Yeah,
so you just
right.
Got some popcorn and
decided to watch.
Yep.
But yeah, this movie was gigantic hit. There's so many funny things. I would say that a lot of the comedic things, like there's when Benny is backing up, when he's trying to like use all the religious, he has literally an entire thing of religious
symbols.
Yeah, like crosses and like the Star of David and all these things. And he just keeps holding them up, saying different phrases.
And different language, whatever the appropriate language is.
Yeah, and then he gets to Hebrew and then he stops. He's like, oh, okay. Like he literally just has all these different ones. But Benny is just a total just like, he gets it bad.
Yeah.
Throughout the whole movie, he's just being a total like scummy character. Like he's helping Emotep out. He abandons Rick in the beginning. When they're on the boat, he's like, I have all the horses. He's like looks to me, you're on the wrong side of the river. It's like, just Benny likes to be a pain.
Oh yeah.
And then, I guess spoilers. And this movie is 20 years old now.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, so
he gets what's coming to him.
Yeah, he gets it bad. He definitely. I think he gets the worst of all the characters.
Absolutely agree.
God, I just think about it. But this movie it's really good. I didn't remember as much of this movie as I thought I would. Like I was like, man, I didn't even remember like most of these characters. I do think it's funny the American characters are so freaking American. They're just like, ooh, boy, back in America, we got America. Do you know we got America back in America?
I'm going to cook up some chili for dinner.
Yep. See, on my American flag.
Apparently all Americans are Southerners. I don't know.
All Southern.
Yeah. We could just talk like this, and I live in Washington State. That's very American.
I live in Washington State.
Oh, yeah. No, obviously American.
Yeah. There we go. But,
whoo golly.
Whoo boy. But yeah, this movie also did have...
I have a Southern family, so don't get offended.
Okay. Just making sure. But yeah, this movie did have multiple sequels. It has two... Well, okay. It has two that most people count, right? You have The Mummy Returns, and then you have The Mummy Tomb... the Dragon's Tomb... Dragon Emperor Tomb thing. It's like this third one, which kind of gets into some other different types of action. But then you also have the spin-off franchise, The Scorpion King. And that itself has 5 movies. Do you hear what I said?
Yeah.
It has five. There's five.
Five Scorpion King movies.
5 Scorpion King movies.
I heard you. Yep. I don't know how to reply to that.
But yeah, on The Mummy Returns,
Donnie, I don't know how to. I don't know what to say. What is it? Donnie, I don't know what to say when you. I don't know. What is it? I don't know what to say when you say things like that.
Something like that.
Is that? I don't know. I don't remember.
I don't know how to respond when you say things like that.
Donnie, I don't know how to respond when you say things like that.
I think that's
there. You go. In case you need another one.
Yeah. Okay.
You could switch between the two.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
It'd be subtle. But
nobody knows what the I'm talking about.
You said another episode.
Do I?
Yeah.
Did I? You left it in?
I left it in. Yeah.
Oh, man, I forgot you left it in.
I don't know say things like that. But yeah, inside The Mummy Returns, you have the Scorpion King played by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. In the very end of that movie, they CG'd him into a giant, terrible.
It's so bad. It's so bad.
It is a really bad CG giant scorpion, The Rock.
It's terrifying for the wrong reasons.
It's horrible. It's some of the worst CG that's made it into a motion picture that I've seen that has that much money.
Dwayne, if you're listening, we love you. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Well, then he did the Scorpion King.
Right.
But then he didn't do the other, the 5C, like all the other ones. But that just goes to show you, and then of course the cartoon. There's multiple video games for this series. There were toys. There's so much stuff for this. This movie was gigantic. It was huge at the time. It only had an $80 million budget, and it made several $100 million. So, I think the original reboot that they had for Universal before this was the 1979 Dracula. That was the other reboot that they did.
Yeah.
It's 79 to 1999. This movie, they just got it. I don't even know how, it's one of those things where, you have Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is so serious. And obviously it's not like a Universal movie. You have the 1993 or 4 Frankenstein with Robert De Niro, which is interesting for, maybe not as good overall. You have Wolf starring Jack Nicholson in the 90s. Very interesting take on the Wolf Man.
Yeah.
That's probably the one that most people don't know. And then you have The Mummy from 1999 with Brendan Fraser. Sorry, we looked this up.
Fraser, yeah.
He says in the commentaries, "This is Brendan Fraser. God, I said it wrong even that time.
This is Brendan Fraser.
There you go. Probably aged better than some of those. Bram Stoker's Dracula aged really well. But that's because it was trying to go for a certain look and a certain style. I think this is successful in that same way, where they went for a certain thing. They're action comedy with some scary parts, and it holds up really well. It's basically Indiana Jones with a mummy.
Yes, and don't get my criticisms wrong here. I'm really being nitpicky in those things that I'm criticizing. The movie's great. Yeah,
it is. It's really fun. It's still today. I think it's really fun, and I know a lot of people make fun of it now because it does have those really ridiculous moments, and the CG by our standards today is pretty bad, but it just all works. I don't know. It was entertaining. We were all in this movie.
Absolutely.
Let's watch all the sequels.
Shout out for the epic eye poke towards the end of the movie. There's a point where she just pokes the dude's eye with her finger. It's some guy's crawling on the car or something, and she just shoves her finger in his eye.
It's with this car chase.
Yeah.
And she just goes, boink.
Yep. That's amazing. If you blink, you'll miss it. It's pretty good. Yeah, that's The Mummy.
That's The Mummy.
All right, 2017, there's a movie that came out called The Mummy, which is different than The Mummy of 1999 fame, and also the 1932 and all of the ones between.
Yeah. This is The Mummy.
This is vastly different than the previous movie and the other movie we talked about, because the first one was a horror, the second one was an action comedy with elements of horror. This one's an action with horror and a little bit of comedy.
Yes, that's very true. So you have, in this film, you have Tom Cruise as Nick Morton. You have Annabelle Wallis as Jenny. You have Sophia Boutella as Aminette.
Wait.
What?
Was that a Forrest
No.
Gump?
Remember, you know when they're when he had the dagger up to him, Aminette has a dagger up to him, and he goes, Jenny.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I know.
I thought you were, man. Okay. Anyway, sorry.
Jenny, mommy.
Yeah, I was like, dude, that was the weakest Forrest Gump Jenny I've heard.
It was.
Yeah,
because it
wasn't what you were doing. Yeah.
You have Jake Johnson as Chris. You have, of course, and you have Russell Crowe as Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. So
he put on a lot of weight for that movie.
Russell Crowe, yeah, he seems kind of fat, doesn't he? In this one, like because I guess I'm so used to Gladiator.
Yeah, where he's super ripped.
Yeah.
Oh, and the mummy's a woman. That's another difference.
Well, that's a big difference. Basically it's reversed. Like Amunet, and it starts off with like kind of like the other one where it has it says long ago. You know, Amunet is basically the favorite of the pharaoh, and she's basically, oh, you're gonna rule over all this, expecting to rule over all this, and then Pharaoh goes off and has another baby with a different woman, and then it's a boy. And so it's like, oh, well, the baby's going to get everything, right? I won't rule.
Yeah, you get nothing.
Yeah, and so
Good day, ma'am.
Amunet makes a deal with the evil spirits and basically becomes this crazy, like, powerful demon person and kills the pharaoh, kills the boy, the baby, and very much like the other ones, is encased in a tomb for many, many centuries. It's weird. They have this thing with Mercury. Like, it's where like her tomb is like, the casket's encased in this like big pool of mercury because it like wards off the demon. Like, it basically keeps the evil at bay. Flash forward to like now, Tom Cruise is basically a weird
military but mercenary guy. No rules, kind of like I do whatever I want.
Yeah, he's sort of like Indiana Jones, but it's real. His character's kind of weird. It's not like, it's like he's like a thief, but they don't really play at that too much. It's kind of, they kind of,
you don't really know what his actual employment is.
No, they're supposed to be like
military.
Yeah, they're soldiers. But,
yeah, but
they're doing all this weird investigation to find this treasure. All of a sudden, because like
I can't imagine that was an order that they were given.
I think it's hinted that it's not, but they also the colonel, they bring in like an airstrike to, like they're in Iraq, like they find Amunet, basically Tom Cruise, and
if you can't tell by now, like the story's really not. It's hard to believe.
It's kind of a mess. Amunet, inside of, just like in the previous ones, Amunet made this bond with this demon, right? And then before she can finish the ritual to release this demon from like a human body, she is then, buried alive and all this stuff. And so when she comes back, same kind of thing. She's all like gross and like a skeletal thing, but she feeds off of people just like the 1999 one to regenerate, and then trying to find Tom Cruise, who then she can, if she kills him, then with a specific dagger, then she can bring back the demon, like release demon, and then she has the pact, and like he can be all powerful, and they can rule together and all this stuff. So similar, a lot of elements to the 1999 and the 1932 one. Obviously, the genders are reversed, where you have a female mummy going around and killing everybody. But in the beginning, when they find like there's an airstrike and there's a big hole, and Tom Cruise and I just can't call him Tom Cruise, Nick and Chris, they go down this hole. And Jenny, isn't Jenny also? Yeah, Jenny's also there.
Right.
That was Tom Cruise's previous relationship, and they don't like each other, or do they?
Yeah, that's another thing that didn't really work well, is that they didn't build enough reason for a relationship between them during the movie. Oh my gosh,
I know. We'll talk more about that in a second. But yeah, they go down this hole and they release Amunet, and in the process of this, basically Tom Cruise is marked to be the sacrifice for Amunet's like demon person. And then in that time, his friend Chris is bitten by a spider and basically taken over by this weird power, and he basically becomes a zombie. Like, they pull the casket out, they're transporting the casket with Amunet in it, and Chris goes crazy and they have to kill him.
Or do they?
That's right. Yeah, because he's like a zombie, and this whole thing with it. And the plane that they're on goes down. It's actually probably my favorite sequence in the whole movie, is this plane that's going down.
Yeah, no, that I think that part of the movie was really well executed.
And they show like Tom Cruise against the wall of the plane, and you can see like it getting closer and closer and closer until it like cuts out, like right up until it goes to the ground, which I thought was like probably one of the coolest things in the whole movie. And Tom Cruise is like supposed to be dead. Like he saves Jenny, but then he goes down on his plane, supposed to like die. And then he realizes like, oh, like he's in like the body
morgue.
bag. Yeah, the morgue.
Yeah.
And he wakes up, he's like, oh, and he's like, I'm alive. Like he died from a plane crash. And his friend, a lot like American Werewolf in London, his dead friend who looks all gross and stuff, says, oh man, like you're in for it. Like you have a curse. There's nothing you can do about it. Like you're going to be a lot of trouble.
Do what she says or there's going to be trouble for everybody.
Yeah, that's not familiar? Yeah, it's exactly like American Werewolf from London. Then Tom Cruise sets off on this thing to try and stop Aminette, but he just accidentally ends up helping her a whole bunch of times. And this movie was kind of terrible in a lot of ways. That's pretty much the plot. I want to get the plot out of the way because I know we're going to devolve into the problems this movie has, but that's pretty much the plot. It's basically as a female mummy. When they discover it, Tom Cruise becomes invincible and like
kills her and then goes crazy, like riding around the desert because he can't die now. And
it's this movie just has so many problems. I mean, I wanted to like this movie so badly because it has some cool things, and it's also fair to mention this is supposed to be the first in a series. So there's all those Marvel movies and all those other or DC
Avengers and stuff.
They were trying to make this a dark universe, like Universal's dark universe. And they tried, I guess they initially were going to plan for Dracula Untold that came out, I think it's 2014, to be the first in that series. That movie I do not like that much. And that movie obviously had a lot of problems, so they just didn't make it the first. So then they made The Mummy the first one, this movie, and they try to set up a ton of stuff for the next movies. Like there's references to Creature from the Black Lagoon. There's
lots of nods to various properties outside of the Mummy.
Yeah, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is obviously a very direct one, but this movie just is a mess. It's just an absolute freaking mess. I hate the ending of this movie. I hate that. I'm going to talk about the ending of this movie because it's just frustrated the heck out of me. Hate this.
The whole movie I was calling out the next line or the next shot without having had seen it before. I already knew what was coming in a lot of cases. Yeah. So I would say the line and then half a second later they would say it.
Oh, sure. You're doing pretty good with that too.
Yeah. And I'd say what the next scene's going to be, and then they'd move to that.
Yep.
So there's a lot of stuff and then there's predictable. A lot of the references in the movie wouldn't necessarily make sense to you unless you were a fan already of the properties that they're referring to. And then of course, like the love interest seems rushed, and his interest in general doesn't seem really to make any sense. You don't know why Tom Cruise is falling in love with what's her face? I don't even know her name. Jenny. Yeah. There's no real meat there.
That's really the biggest issue of this movie. I mean, I'm okay with supernatural thrillers or action horror or comedy horror and stuff. I'm totally okay with that. Like I love that kind of movie, but it's this movie.
That's not what they're selling here.
Yeah, well, probably one of the most interesting characters is like Chris, who's dead, who's his friend who died and stuff, because he's kind of charming in a lot of ways, and
right.
But like Tom Cruise's character, Nick, it is very unclear as to why he's like in the army and stuff. And he's going after all this stuff, or he's like he's a treasure hunter, and it's implied that he's like really sleazy, kind of like Indiana Jones, that he just goes off, he doesn't care about anybody else, but then but very early in the movie is very selfless, and they've tried to play up the whole romance with him and Jenny, but I literally just don't see it at all. Like the way they edited it, the way they characterized Jenny in this movie did not make me want Tom Cruise to go with her.
She was a prop.
Yeah, it's just so sad because the 1999 one does it so well, where you're just like, oh man, I can't.
It totally makes sense.
I can't wait. Can't wait till they get together. They're both like at each other's throat. It's like the whole movie. You're like, yeah, This, they don't build up their involvement together at all. And at the, I'm just gonna spoil this at the end.
No. I mean, you were talking trash about this one particular thing through the whole movie. So I think it's important that you actually say it.
The thing that bothers me the most, right, in this whole movie is, they don't really, and it's gonna be spoilers. I'm just letting you know. But you shouldn't go watch this movie.
It doesn't matter anyway because it wouldn't really negatively impact your viewing experience.
So throughout the whole movie, like they're trying to stop Amunet, whatever, and they're not really doing a good job. Amunet seems extremely overpowered, like throughout the whole movie. Like, just she can mess with Tom Cruise's head. She has all these like undead slaves. She can basically just zombify anybody. And she, at the very end, there's like they're in this cave and. Like, oh, well, if you kill yourself or, like, you stab this thing, then you'll become a god, whatever, and we can rule together. Keep in mind, Amunet, like, is totally badass, like, throughout this whole film. And unlike it, it's so weird because in some ways it's kind of like the 32 one in that it's like, I don't want to die because then won't be me. I don't want this thing to take over. And Tom Cruise, in the end, he kills himself, like, stabs himself with the dagger, and then becomes, like, a god. But he's pretty much the same dude, right?
Right.
And Amunet, who is way more awesome than Jenny. Jenny's in this movie is lame. She doesn't have cool mummy powers. Her hair is way worse than Amunet's.
That's true.
Amunet has way awesome hair. She got wicked cool tattoos all over her. She's got cool raps.
The whole movie, Amunet's been portrayed as this incredible badass even before death.
Yep. And I get it. I think the beginning when they show her killing the baby, you're supposed to automatically just be like, oh no, whatever. I'm like, Amunet was such a cool character in this. And in the end, Tom Cruise becomes a god and then just kills her like in 2 seconds. And I was like, why? This whole...
Yeah.
Because he does... he basically has, literally a god. He can control life. And so he basically kills Amunet and then he revives Jenny. But, like, I just liked Amunet so much more as a character because it's one of the few characters in this movie that you actually get something from.
It's explained. You know what the motivations are. You know, like, why she's doing what she's doing. Like, all of that's clear, and that there's nobody else in the movie where that's the case, except maybe Chris.
Yeah, because Chris is, like, kind of funny. He talks about, like, oh, man, like, you need to break me from this curse. Like, you're kind of like, oh, okay, like, it's a little bit more interesting, something a little different, and it just bugged me. So, like, when I just think about it, it just bugs me with this movie so much. And they could maybe, with the franchise, because they do show Amunet, like, they take her and encase her inside the coffin and Mercury again. They could find some way, maybe in the later movies, to bring her back or something. But that character was so cool. And it was one of the coolest things about the movie. And then it's like the killer. Like, yep. And of course, even with The Mummy Returns, I guess they bring back Imhotep in that for the, sequel to the 1999 movie. But I just bugs the heck out of me.
How long is the movie?
The movie, I think it's like 2 hours and something. It's pretty long.
So like 100. Okay, so 120 minutes. What, 5 over 120? I guess really what I'm trying to get to is how much percentage of the movie did they devote to explaining a certain aspect of one of the characters that makes absolutely zero difference in the movie whatsoever, which is Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Oh my God!
They spent about 5% of the movie with Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, because I think they're trying to set up that property for a future release or whatever. But maybe spend that time developing
the characters that are already there, and motivations for those characters and the relationship building that you're trying to get us to buy into. There's a significant amount of time spent on things that don't really matter and have no impact whatsoever on the movie, and very little time on things that would really help sell us the story. And the story itself is interesting. Well, hey, it's pretty much just the other ones just done with the gender reversed. It's pretty much it.
Well, but I mean, the different aspects of that, okay, so this, how did she end up in Iraq? Mm-hmm. Right? So different elements of the story like that, that are like, oh yeah, okay, like this could go somewhere interesting, but they just didn't spend enough time on developing that
like
kind
the
of
Crusaders
stuff.
and stuff too.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it was... I was just really frustrated by this movie. This movie is just so frustrating for me.
Yeah.
I liked some things. I listened to this with commentary too as well. I listened to the director's commentary, and I kind of got what they were trying to do. Like they seemed like they were pretty proud of it. Like, and a lot of what they try to explain makes a lot of sense, but it's just an average action movie with supernatural elements that are like the best part of it, but then they don't really. They just.
If this was a setup that worked, where there were additional movies to watch that fleshed all this stuff out, so to speak, then maybe you could kind of see it as an introduction to that, right? Okay, you get more explanation about what happened, maybe via flashbacks or history when you see other people interacting with Tom Cruise's character in a future movie.
Yeah.
Or you get to see more of, the previous work that Dr. Jekyll did, or something. But the problem is that there's just, if you're increasing the scope as big as they've increased it, and you have nothing else to kind of fill in that universe for you for that specific movie, it just all falls apart.
Yeah. I agree. Well, Marvel did it really good by just having little teasers at the end, or like the whole thing with, I think it's Nick Fury's like in, I think it's Iron Man 2, where you have like Nick Fury and I think, is it Black Widow? Is that the name of the character? Like you have like them in the movie, but they don't really focus on that much. It's like, there's not really revealed that they're part of the Avengers even until way later. They just kind of let the movie play out and it's like, oh, okay, at the end.
Right.
But this is like, they do a whole thing with Dr. Jekyll turning into Mr. Hyde, and they don't really explain it, and they
apparently he has to inject himself every 5 minutes or he turns into Mr. Hyde.
That was the most ridiculous. It's like,
like
literally he has like a 5 needle mark thing and he shoves it into his hand and he's like, oh, now I'm back to normal. And then like 10 seconds later he's like, oh, I was like,
do it again.
How much of this does he make?
Yeah, and why do you need 5 different syringes to go in at the same time? Maybe you can't mix a cocktail.
Maybe you just make one big one.
You can't do a big one, man. You can't pre-mix it. It's got to mix in your blood or something. I don't know. There's just too much there where it's like...
too many questions.
Yeah, and you pushed this really hard, but then you didn't give me any payoff.
Yeah, and then also like I thought it was funny in that scene when Jenny's fighting the bad guy, she hits the guy with the book from the 1999 Mummy.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of little
nods.
That.
There's a creature from Black Lagoon's hand, and like I think there's like a vampire skull and stuff. There's a lot of different things they're trying to set up and do and reference, and I like that stuff. But I just freaking hate the ending of this movie so much. I think it's so stupid, especially if they're trying to set up a franchise. Like, why not let Amanette like go or something, like to be where it's like she's defeated today, like why does it have to be this whole thing where like one of the characters that you're trying to maybe build up a thing with, like we have the mummy, whatever, we're just gonna kill off the mummy, like the first thing. It's just so frustrating to me. And there's been I think even the producer of this movie came out and like later was like, yeah, they wanted to put so much stuff into one film and it really rushed us, and it was like the making it was a mess. I find this movie kind of enjoyable in some ways up until a certain point where with the ending. When it's just the ending that I just hate it, because I'm like, why would he choose Jenny? Throughout the whole movie, there hasn't really been any reason for them to supremely like each other or to give up the universe. Like, he's like, I'm a god. I can do anything I want. I will give up this to whatever to revive this woman who throughout the whole movie, I was like, I bickered with, and it's like a rom-com type relationship. It was just...
I don't even know if it's rom-com type relationship worthy. I don't even know whether that's worthy. Like the relationship
doesn't exist.
The interaction between them is so sparse and emotionless, except for being snarky at each other, not in a fun way, but in like you irritate me kind of way.
Yeah.
There's no basis of him being in love with her. And if it was because of the previous relationship they had, well, maybe he should be like...
Maybe we should have seen
maybe we should have seen more heartbreak, right? Yeah. Him being all sad and mopey, or like a flashback or something to explain like, oh, he's actually super in love with her.
Yeah. And they don't even kiss in this movie. Apparently Tom Cruise refused to do the kiss scene.
Yeah.
Like the day of shooting, he's like, oh, I'm not going to kiss her. Like, and she was all like, why? But yeah, he refused. And so yeah, we got even less. They literally don't even kiss or anything in this movie. And he's like supposed to give up the power, like being a actual crazy god. And it does lead off into a sequel. They bring Chris back, which I was happy because he's like the best character in the movie you barely get to see him. But this movie, it's just so disappointing. It's just so disappointing because the mummy is actually really cool, even though we've kind of seen the same thing like for a third time. But it's just really frustrating. That's the best way to describe this movie. It's very frustrating, very disappointing. And so I give it 2.5 wraps out of 5.
I think that's generous.
I give it 2 reps out of 5.
Yeah, I think that's more in line with.
It's not even halfway good.
It's not even halfway good. Yeah, I think I wouldn't give it 1. You know, there are definitely elements of the movie that are well executed and I enjoyed.
Yeah, the revival scenes and stuff, the monstery bits, but
right.
The main part of it is just terrible.
Yeah, watch it if you want to.
Yeah, I
but
mean,
if you don't, nobody's gonna care.
That's pretty much how I can describe it. It's a action horror with some comedy and all the CGs. I thought, a perfect example that I thought to compare is the car chase scenes. Right, you do the 1999 one, which is a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
You do which is a whole bunch of actual actors in crappy clothing and pads and stuff, where it's pretty obvious that they're driving kind of slow, but it's like they're really. Like they're all just get off of me, blah blah blah. You know, like and it's action packed, but it's low impact action. You know what I mean? Like for that time, you know, you could tell that they were really driving and stuff, and it works. It works so well. It's like a comedy, serious chasing. Like you're actually worried they might, you know, it brings you into it. This has a car scene. They're like driving away in like a work truck, and there's all these zombies coming in, whatever, and they're all just so aggressive and blood, and it's all in your face whenever. I don't think either one of us were even worried that anything was going to happen because it's just, it's so obviously CG, and they're just like, it's like, oh man.
And then they crash, and these zombies, which are doing like, you know, 15, 20 foot leaps into the air, and you know, like punching out windscreens and whatever else, like somehow don't catch up with them. Yeah. When the car crashes.
It's just insane. It just, I just think the car chase between those two just explains it. I was bored by one, and the other one I was like fully entertained. So
yeah, that makes sense to me. I totally agree.
So this was I hate that on a bad note, but that's pretty much where we are right now. But there's no more Dark Universe movies out yet. We did talk about The Invisible Man, you know, like last podcast.
Right, and how much they saved on CG. Yeah. I love that joke.
He's walking towards me. He's doing some backflips. My gosh, he's so invisible. I swear it's Johnny Depp. And then you just take lines from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, I just edit them in.
Who are you? I'm Jack the Invisible Man.
You don't even have to try and match the lip flaps.
That's right.
I think it saves so much money.
Jack Sparrow, mighty pirate. Whoa, he's pretending to be a pirate.
No, that's good. He'll be slowed down by his peg leg.
That's it. Oh, God. But yeah, this was that's The Mummy and The Mummy and The Mummy.
Yeah. The three.
What was your favorite?
My Three Mummies.
That's pretty good. That'd be a good movie. My Three Mummies. And then the tagline could be, they've got it under wraps.
Yeah.
They're all wrapped up right now. What was your favorite?
Oh, the 99 for sure.
It was so good.
So good.
It's so funny because it's pretty cheesy in a lot of ways. It's hard because for a modern audience, it still really holds up for a modern audience because it's just that perfect blend of comedy, action, horror. The 1932 one is good in a completely different way, because it's more of a suspense mystery kind of story.
Agreed.
But if you're gonna pick one to watch today, and you know, like you're a modern viewer, you can't go wrong with The Mummy 1999. And heck, if you like it, then you can watch all like 8 sequels.
Right.
And the cartoon series.
And if you're into old movies, or you like noticing details and different, you know, ways that they film stuff and edited stuff way back in the day, then the 32 one is a good movie to watch too.
Love those model shots.
Yeah.
But if you like terrible Tom Cruise movies with horrible endings because you like personally abusing yourself, I say go 2017. I mean, that sounds about right for me.
Watch it twice.
Oh God. Anyway, that's the Mummy, our Mummy episode. Who knows? Maybe we'll do Mummy sequels or a different Mummy episode or something eventually. I know I'm gonna watch all the other sequels to the Brendan Fraser one. I'm
looking forward to watching the Hammer releases.
Oh, they're so good. I'll loan you copies of them all.
Yeah, right on.
But yeah, that's this episode of GothCast. Of course, like we said, you can check us out on Spotify, iTunes. Leave us a review if you would prefer. If you really enjoy this,
I prefer leave us a review.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. If you leave a review, also by the way, you're entered into whatever you're entered into whatever contest we hold next
In the future, yeah.
in the future. So
Yeah.
any reviews on there, unless you've already won, I think.
Yes. I would say that's probably fair.
Yeah. Then so sorry, Gigi.
Yeah.
But also you're welcome.
Yeah.
If we have any major contests where it's like super huge giveaway, something or other, I'm sure we'll figure something out where you can enter again. But
We always do.
But if you enter a review, you're eligible for whatever we decide to give away next.
Yeah.
And there's definitely more stuff for us to give away. So
Yeah. Well, all right. This has been me and Brian. You know what's next, right? For the trilogy movie that we're gonna do,
tell me,
it's gonna be Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
I don't know if that's gonna be the next movie episode, but it's gonna be like when we come back and do one where it's gonna be different years of the same story.
Yeah.
Then it's gonna be Frankenstein.
We're going to need to do enough of those that we can end up doing Young Frankenstein.
Oh man, we'd have to do all the original ones: Ghost, Son, Bride, and then the original. And then we'd have to do, if we did that, then we'd have to do Young Frankenstein, because it's literally just a parody of those movies.
Right. Well, I mean, we only need to do 6, right?
What do you mean?
Well, it's 3 and 3, so we do 3 an episode. So there needs to be 6 total Frankenstein movies.
Oh man. Oh, then we do Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Oh well, what about Frankenstein's Frankenstein. Yeah, Frankenstein.
Frankenstein's Monster. Frankenstein.
Yeah.
That is so good.
Yeah, we'll do that one too.
Well, yeah. Anyway, this has been The Mummy, and yeah, it's been fun. I mean, it's always a good time to watch horror movies and suspense movies, and while none of these was overtly gross or horrific, except for that Scarab, man, it's scary as hell. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this one, and hope you've enjoyed this episode. And of course, make sure to
sleep with the lights on.
You come on.
I thought that's what we were going to say.
Make sure to stay spooky.